what I wanted to focus on are the shifts in our understanding of the term or the phrase, the art of pedagogy. How should we understand it today? This seems like a sweepingly large question, and therefore I wanted to bring it down to observations about teaching and learning processes in a particular place. And that particular place happens to be the city I live in, London, and to look at the shifts in the city as it becomes a totally different place, moving away from its colonial and post-colonial as a colonial and post-colonial capital into a post-imperial and global city. The shifts I want to observe are to do with the terms of demolition of my street, or at least one whole part of my street, in the neighborhood called Bloomsbury, which is the key knowledge production center of the city. Sandwich Street, quaint as the name might sound to many of you, is perhaps not as odd as McDonald Street or something today, is a higgledy-piggledy street which has been flattened out in order to make way for an education center, halls of residence, gymnasia, and all sorts of conference centers, which in a way shifts the emphasis from the idea that education is an experience, that it is about intimacy of contact, about an immersion and a duration between people, and the idea that we can have a center that will now actually, as it were, sell educational products and packages as though these were IKEA flat packs and kits. And of course, I'm observing this from my kitchen, which is on this side of the street, with my students and researchers. So the kitchen is one vantage point for the research in order deliberately to question the idea of knowledge as an impersonal space, quite outside the domestic and the intimate everyday space in which one lives. A symbol of this change in pedagogy is the fate in our area of the great Warburg collection of books and the Warburg Institute, which is under threat in this transformation of the city. The Warburg collection, as many of you might know, arrived under terrible conditions, but it was a famous library in the city of Hamburg in Germany. There, Warburg had collected a range of material which the Nazis were getting ready to burn in one of their celebrated and notorious book-burning episodes. Warburg students managed to pack his books in 2 steamships and come sailing to London with them. So we have the library in exile in the neighborhood, which the university in a way celebrated in the 50s up to the times we are in today, when the managers would rather like to strip the library, disperse it, and change the building into a school for language studies in order to prepare people to come for the global IKEA flat-pack kit. Thank goodness this has been, as it were, stalled and staved for the moment. What the shift entails is what I call, in my own terminology, the shift from the knowledge mecca, with all the connotations of the word mecca in capital M and in small letter m, a change from the knowledge mecca to what is called the knowledge quarter. And this is taking place in the larger context of the rise or the emergence of a know-all society, a knowledge-based economy and a knowledge society in which the great triumphs of algorithmic know-how are, of course, things of which we are beneficiaries. But at the same time, this means that all aspects of life, right down to our everyday activities with smartphones, cash point machines, etc., have become increasingly part of a programmed and procedural set of activities or actions. What has taken over is a new drill. And it is this drill that I am concerned with, which in fact is encapsulated in the idea of rounds and routinizations, routines, regimes, which add up to giving us the idea of the curriculum, these circular circuits and routines. I don't seem to have reached midpoint to move on to the next image, but these are simply backdrops. The way in which we should perhaps focus on the curriculum today is going back from its Latinate form, the curriculum, to its Greek form in the palindrome. The palindrome was the original Greek race course or track, which was also organized as a circuit, but really meant or was perceived as a race to the end and then a reverse race back to the starting point. What the palindrome means as a metaphor or as a figure of language or speech is the idea that something could be read forwards and the same word or sentence could be read backwards in the same way. This idea of the mirror image then is caught up in the notion of the palindrome in literary studies. But for the idea of knowledge systems, it marks out the idea of the logic of reversibility. You can do something in one direction and then it can be tracked back in the same direction. The start point and destination are pre-given and, as it were, stabilized. There is no point at which one could move out of this determined system. It is a closed system of activity and thinking. Let me stress again that the triumphs of contemporary life are based on this kind of algorithmic knowledge. So this is not, in a way, a critique of this very abstractive, reversible system of thinking. It is rather to say it's not the only way of understanding how consciousness, how the process of engagement with other minds, how our understanding of shaping the world should actually proceed. Algorithmic knowledge is not only, however, about problem solving. This is how we have tended to stereotype such material. It is, as it's often claimed, at a higher level, it is about generating problems. It is about innovation. But if one thinks carefully, innovation means shifting and changing things within a particular framework. Against this, perhaps, I was dreading this to be tooted by the trumpeter, and I've overstepped my mark. I'll close by saying that Duchamp's idea, no solution because there is no problem, this view of art reminds us of an open-ended system against the closed system. And this open-endedness, which I call Hamletization, is in fact a form of thinking centered around wool gathering, away from the very clued up states of thinking towards a much more cluelessness condition with which art begins. It always begins from the position of saying, I don't know what I'm going to do with the next work that I'm involved in. This shift is therefore from drill to drift, and may I leave it there? Thank you.
I've been thinking of a question to draw you out further. And I was struck by the image on the corner of the demolition and reconstruction. And I was thinking of the algorithm knowledge and trying to shift, and being an artist, this idea of it's almost a Zen idea of like, I'm going to come to this knowing nothing.
Yes.
And maybe when you work with students or other people, you're like, let's all start from scratch. And it would seem that that's good for human beings as a pedagogical alternative. But why does it seem that it might not be so good for the state to say it's like, we're just going to demolish these buildings and start from scratch? And you also made another reference to the burning of a library, which would also, you could say, it's a starting from scratch. And why is it that it doesn't, do you think that this knowing nothing can scale up to a societal level, or does it only work at a more localized human level?
Mm-hmm. Well, what a drastic and dramatic set of questions. I don't think I know how to answer them to start with, but I'll have a stab, as they say. The idea that such knowledge might be appropriated by the state, that the idea of being in a situation of knowing nothing or cluelessness as a state that is deeply productive or fruitful is not to be simply consigned to art knowledge as though this is somehow secondary to knowledge systems. I think the state has generally, through a very positivist view, tended to see science of a certain kind as true knowledge, and then beyond it, the social sciences, the humanities, and the creative arts as what von Hayek, for example, the great economist, called the pretense of knowledge, or what Lakatos, the great philosopher of sciences, distinguished between the notion of science and pseudoscience, and you can imagine where art fits in all of this. So the idea is to rethink in our times the kind of hierarchical relations to which, in a way, art has been consigned, and to claim for it a central position in the development of the human in the world. It's not just a private activity with the artist, with themselves, as it were. It is to do with setting up totally different goals, both cultural and social, and obviously political.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.